Yeah, I actually think that this is a breakthrough in the sense of horse and buggy days. You have basically you go from people walking to then people getting on horses, and then horses carrying stuff. People carrying stuff to wait. Why don't we just have the horses carry stuff? And then wait, why don't we just have the horses carry a cart that can carry stuff? And then we have the car, and it's a completely new thing, right? The concept is the same. It's getting from point A to point B, but it just changes the game on what's possible now.
The future of music.
The future of music. The future of music.
The future of music.
The future of music.
The Future of Music podcast.
Hey there! Once again, it's the Future of Music podcast. And of course, we always show you how to survive and thrive in the future of music. I am Ryan Withrow, one of your hosts, joined by Jonathan Boyd, the other host. Neither of us take the claim of main versus co because that's rude. And we are equal opportunity, okay? And we love each other equally. So first and foremost, this is episode 30. We've already done 30 of these. I'm going to make sure that we put some like confetti on the screen or something. Because I forgot to do it for the actual recording. I didn't remember that. But it's a 30th episode, man. And to celebrate, what I've heard is Mike Portnoy has decided to join Dream Theater just because this is episode 30. That's why he came back. That's why. So thank you, Mike Portnoy. We appreciate that. He made it. We did it. And yeah, maybe 1% of the listeners will understand what I'm talking about. But in any event, John, we are excited today to bring forth some new technology, some new stuff in the music world and realm, in the VR world and realm. So what are we talking about? What should we be excited about today?
Yeah, so what's super interesting is, we've been talking about all this new stuff, this new technology that we predict is going to be happening, is going to be coming down the pike, and it kind of feels like the dam is broken already, and we're just being flooded by all this new stuff that we've been talking about. And today's something that we actually haven't even thought about, which is spatial audio. So we've talked about before the idea of these new technologies being more and more accessible, so more and more people will use them, right? But one thing we haven't talked about is the idea of audio in space, meaning like if you have a VR headset or something like that, where you can hear, it's like a surround sound, right? It's a new version of surround sound. But we haven't talked about the idea of being able to use it and mix it and change it and do things like that, especially not in a platform that's as common as a DAW like Cubase. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Perfection. And it's also perfection to have you like, subscribe, and click the alert button so that you're reminded of every time we have another episode, like episode 31 coming up next. And also make sure you follow and feel free to rate us, no matter how wonderfully or poorly you feel we're doing here. We like to see you interact on your favorite podcast platform. And for those of you that did, thank you. We are currently 5 stars. I'm very proud of that. Okay, John. But outside of that, we are talking VR stuff. We're talking the specifically Dear Realities, DearVR Spatial Connect. Say it 5 times fast. As soon as you're done saying knapsack straps, that one's hard as well. But this is the entire idea of introducing VR mixing to Cubase 12. So for those of you that don't know, Cubase is a digital audio workstation. It's a DAW, and it's the one I prefer to use. And I feel like I'm old just by saying that for some reason. It always seems like Cubase is associated with like, oh, you still use Cubase? Yes, proudly. Okay, it's wonderful. And 12 is their most recent iteration. And of course, in a DAW, typically you think of it like we think of it. And we'll talk about it more, but you think of opening it up, seeing your computer, clicking record and recording your track, or adding MIDI or doing whatever, just seeing it in this, computer screen version that's just flat to you, and that's it. But we so often forget about the idea that when we put a VR headset on, and let's say we're playing a game, or let's say we're doing a meditation app, or we're doing anything in the VR world, you're hearing certain sounds, whether it's music or sounds as well, differently. Like when we think about Golf Plus, for example, on VR, when I'm playing that with my brother-in-law and his friend, and I'm looking around in the environment, the music is playing in the background, I'm hearing a bird behind me fly away, and if I look in that direction, I hear it as if I'm looking right at it in the real world. The same thing goes for music. So what Dear Reality has done is actually bring in one of their spatial audio experts and introduced VR mixing, a controller that connects directly into Cubase from your VR headset. So I've got a video for you, John, to show you, and those actually listening will be able to hear as well because they're talking through it. But if you do want to see the video, make sure you fire it up on the YouTubes as well because it will be there. But let's take a look at Dear Reality's DearVR Spatial Connect.
Imagine you could visualize and control the mix all around you. To work in VR, AR, 360 video, or even stereo with a unique tool. This has never been done before, and it has become an absolutely revolutionary workflow now. But with DearVR Spatial Connect, you just leave your headset on. You can control the complete digital audio workstation there. Media has changed to become immersive. So mixing audio has to become immersive and more intuitive too.
Beautiful. It's I don't know. We talked to Andromeda in the last episode, and I remember it being like, just in your mixes, there's so much going on. But that's audible. You can tell that something like that's happening in just a music composition. But when you see a video like this, and for those of you that weren't watching the video, it's somebody in almost like a game environment mapping out all of the different points of audio and where they will be coming from. So a ship goes by and they're actually tagging the ship and moving along with it and guiding it so that it knows track 1.2, the ship audio is this object. When it comes to this range, increase volume, decrease volume. And just thinking of like how hard that is, first of all, how difficult that must have been to like code back in the day when we didn't have this ability. It's just, I can't comprehend. But it's this workspace that surrounds you. You're able to change the DAW. You're actually able to see when you're changing volumes, when you're changing cutoffs, when you're doing pitch bends, everything. It's auto mapping in the actual digital audio workstation in Cubase while you're still sitting in the VR headset, which eliminates any issues or disconnect with creativity or getting out of your zone or your focus points. It's amazing stuff for sure.
Yeah,
It's stuff that I didn't know was necessary, but after watching, I'm like, highly necessary. That's definitely something that is needed for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing in that way. So I want to talk through this stuff, obviously, John, but let's kind of pull it back a little. All right. Like we always do. The idea of editing and going through the process. Back in the day, like it didn't even really exist, right? Back in the day, it was like, you got to track it good. Just track it right now. We're going directly to tape. Like, you better do this right because, you know, the effects are now. They're not later. So luckily I kind of like grew up in the age of DAWs coming in as a primary focus. But then we go to just simply now. Like even now, the DAW, like I explained, is what I explained. It's flat. It's just right there in front of you. You've got to take your eye away from the guitar, your eye away from the game, whatever it might be. It is what it is. That's where we're at now. And now we see this. So yeah, let's start with some questions here. First of all, being somebody that is being introduced to this right now, you going through that, what are your thoughts initially? Are you stoked? Are you happy? Are you curious? You know, where are you at after seeing the demo?
Yeah, you know, I actually think that this is a breakthrough in the sense of horse and buggy days. You know, you have basically you go from people walking to then people getting on horses and then horses carrying stuff, you know, people carrying stuff to wait, why don't we just have the horses carry stuff? And then wait, why don't we just have the horses carry a cart that can carry stuff? And then we have the car. And it's a completely new thing, right? The concept is the same. It's getting from point A to point B, but it just changes the game on what's possible now. And previously, I was thinking about this as I was watching and as you were just asking that question. Previously, it was all about assembly. And what I mean is you have to record separately, you have to edit separately, you have to make graphics separately, you have to do everything separate and assemble it all, right? But now, I highly encourage, whoever, if you're listening, definitely watch this on YouTube. It's amazing at what this does. But it basically takes everything, all of those components, and does away with the assembly. And now this sounds weird, but virtual reality is it's approaching reality in the sense of using all of the senses at the same time. So being able to see something, hear something, smell something, etc. It's going into this like multi-sensory experience to create an output or to create a final product. And that's what's fascinating most to me, because I was wondering before this, how would you mix? You said mixing. When I hear the word mixing, and I imagine almost 100% of people, when they hear mixing, they think about a flat screen or they think about a soundboard, right? Something flat where you're controlling tracks and things like that. I never imagined it would be a spatial thing where I have a VR headset on and I can actually, um, I imagine the soundboard or the DAW or whatever. I imagine you being able to tweak different sounds from different locations in physical space, but you would kind of have to imagine it. For example, like speaker 2, speaker 3, speaker 4, or whatever. But this shows you literally the actual world that you're in. And as you said, it's amazing that you can make changes while you're there and hear things in the actual world, and it automatically changes that, it's synced to Cubase. But yeah, I think this is game changing. I don't want to say everything, but there's this huge push toward virtual reality. It's not that it's coming; it is coming, but it's here, and it's not going to go anywhere. It's only going to get bigger. So this ability, I just see it as a breakthrough. It's like the iPhone for the first time. Maybe not that big, but similar.
And I would also say that for anybody looking for like a comparable thing, Dolby Atmos, right? Which is like one of the best versions of surround sound that we know. I actually have a friend of mine that wrote an entire album using like an 80-piece orchestra, 30-piece choir, and drums and guitar and everything, with the full thought of it being in Dolby Atmos. And it was a massive undertaking, massive project. But it was the idea of being able to feel like you are completely surrounded in all the right ways of where the music you want it to come from. So as you're sitting in the middle of a room, if you want to hear a French horn coming from, 45 degrees to your right, you feel like that person is playing right there. And that was revolutionary. Like, so many millions and billions of dollars went into the development of that. Well, this literally takes that and it builds on it. So Cubase 12 has the ability to work with Dolby Atmos. And with that, they just stack right on top. And I think for me, the idea is a huge thing. But even further than that, I remember us interviewing and talking to the other teams we have, like Virtuoso, and some of the other key players out there. And I remember you and I having a conversation around, it's really cool to be able to write music, compose music, record music, and have it all right in your headset. But when is the day that it links to your DAW so that you can start to work in your digital audio workstation while you're still working in there, and it's able to just bring it right into your typical digital audio workstation that you work in, like Cubase, so that you can keep it going? And that was probably 5 to 10 episodes ago. And here we are with a tool that's already like, let's connect them. Let's do it. Yeah. And I'm mostly excited for that because the heavy lifting is done then. Again, it becomes this process of pure creativity. And then you just go right into the workspace and you could edit and play around and just remain creative in that way and get those ideas. But this really is focused, at least in the video, if you watched it, on environment, which is huge. So I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about what this does for the ability for like VR, AR, mixed reality environment. And then I also want to talk about what we think this can do potentially for just music in general. How can we start using this as musicians and people being creative with music outside of it being focused on like gameplay and everything? So I guess the big one for me is to start is the idea of doing it in environments and all of this. So I know I personally use a lot of the apps out there that are game focused. So a lot of Golf Plus. I say that a lot. I just like it. I don't know. But for me, it's fun. It's enjoyable. But I don't really pay attention until I start looking at stuff like this as to what goes into that
Mhm.
kind of audio. It's easy for us to get into a VR headset and think, this is cool. It's a great game. But
Yep.
then when people are done listening to this podcast, I want them to go into a game in their VR headset and start to walk around and move around and turn your head and start noticing that every single bit of sound was coded to be in a specific location, moving somewhere, tracking somewhere. And up until now, it took manually coding that in more than likely and saying, this object at this pixel point that moves to this pixel point, make this sound with it. And it's not a visual thing. Now this
Mhm.
visualizes it, makes it visual for everybody going through. So number one, what does something like this mean for the future of atmospheric stuff, environment stuff in VR? What do you think, John?
I think it's just a speed question, honestly, because like you said previously in 2D, you code it and you're imagining, and you test it and you go back to the coding screen or whatever. Um, but I just see this as a productivity tool, basically, for environments like that. So for creating VR games or something, it would be easy for us to, let's imagine ourselves hopping into a Golf Plus course, a golf course, and
Hey,
we're
you
like,
want to
oh,
go?
let's,
Let's
this
go.
bird,
Let's go. I'm not
yeah,
addicted. I don't have a problem.
this bird goes over here, this sound goes over here. It just seems like it would be a lot faster in that sense.
I'd agree with that. And I think it's a lot more fun. I think what we're going to see as well is a lot better sound design and like more creative sound
Uh-huh.
design. And I'm excited for that because, again, it's when you think about putting it on, testing it, and being like, looks good, take it off. All right, let's code some more stuff. Let's see what it's like. All right, put it back on. Instead of just being in that flow state, you're in the environment and you're just working within it. So I think we'll see a lot more attention to detail. But my brain as a musician, we've talked about so many things, just music in general, in the world of VR, AR, all of that.
Hmm.
But we've also talked about like albums, music videos, concerts, all of this, which now I start thinking, man, how cool would it be to design something where you're watching a concert and I could walk up to like the side of the guitarist and I could
Yep.
really focus on where his amplifier is versus going to the other side and hearing the bass amplifier and being in that spatial environment. So I'm excited about that and what's to come. But what do you think? What is this going to do for musicians, music performance?
Yeah, I mean, what you just mentioned, I think, is extremely interesting, especially if they're we've talked about this idea of the Apple Vision Pro. Well, they've talked about it, but we talk about them talking about it, about the idea that you're going to have 3D video, right? And we talked about this ability to maybe take a video at a concert and be at the concert again. You put on your headset, you're actually there, you're looking around. Maybe you can walk up to the stage, like you said, and hearing somebody's amp versus, like, let's say the guitar player's amp on this side of the stage versus the bass player's amp, and you can kind of walk around. I think that would be interesting for a lot of people. But really, where I kind of see this going is 3D music.
Mm.
So previously, as far as I ever know in history, unless you're in a live setting, and even in a live setting, the music is coming from one place. But
Mhm.
unless you're in the middle, a ring, a live setting of musicians or something like that, um, the sound is always either coming from in front of you or on the sides. And if you go to a mixing environment, you can only pan right or left. I see this taking the ability to make music in 3D. So, like, you can pan behind you. So you can pan and surround sound and have instruments behind you. You can be in the middle of the music rather than being in front of and listening to the music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wrote down a note that came to my brain, which is because of that, I think this
Mm-hmm.
will make an amateur into a pro expert in spatial audio. Now knowing that I don't have to worry about figuring out what my DAW needs to look like in this completely foreign environment to me. I've been working in one way in a DAW for too long. Okay, I'm not young, but I've been doing it for a long time, and thinking of adding a variable without a tool like this. It's daunting. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sit there and start to be like, let me test out composing and writing cool music that
Yep.
works well with VR. I'm not going to do it. But if I have a tool like this that's doing all the work for me and allows me to do that, I'm going to do it. So I
Mhm.
feel like we will see a lot more people getting into the idea of spatial audio and recording with tools like this, because it's easy. It's very easy for them to play around in it and be like, it's done. And they sit down and there's the file. There it is. They know what they need to load into a VR program or an AR program to get the experience that they just created. So I think that we're going to see more people being creative with music and getting into the world and expression of music through
Mhm.
something like this. And I even see, multiverse is kind of like foreign anymore. Like, it hasn't really gotten its metaverse taken off or anything, but I see it coming into play with stuff like this, like being able to walk over here, hearing a certain type of music or a certain mix of music coming towards the center more, and hearing things come together so that you hear
Mhm.
a full mix, or going over here. All kinds of stuff. I think that we're going to see a lot more creativity and a lot more amateurs coming in, becoming easily pros in an area that they never thought they'd be able to dabble into, or at the very least, have something they're proud of, and
Mhm.
telling people to come in and check it out. Look what I just made. You can walk around everywhere, and every sound I did, this is all my stuff. That's what I think I'm most excited about, is seeing, again, more music ability getting to the hands of everybody, the masses, because it's just, you saw, it's just a turn of the controllers to adjust certain functions and move. It removes the instrument. It removes the DAW as well. We're forgetting to even mention that you're recording in a DAW, and if you have it plugged in and you've never used Cubase, done. It's doing it. It's doing it for you. So you don't even need that level of expertise. You're just going in and creating. And that's what we've talked about for the longest time. The future of music really is about removing the barrier that prevents people from playing music and allowing them to express themselves with music.
Yeah, I agree. And also, one of the interesting things and the most exciting things I think coming along with this is whenever you lower a barrier to provide access for something, especially something creative, such as music, you provide the opportunity for a lot more people to come in and start experimenting and trying it, right? And that's where you have kind of explosions. And I've been talking about this for a number of years, the new musical renaissance, right? I think we're starting to see why that might happen. Um, but what I was saying is that new people can come in and they can experiment and explore, and they don't really have to have a lot of skills. They don't have to be some, accomplished classical guitarist or something like that, or having had like 10 years of mixing experience and running soundboards and things. You just don't need to do that. You just put on a headset and you just kind of play around, and people will find new and creative ways to do something. And then that's what sparks kind of an explosion of new ways to do things.
Yeah, I'm excited. I have Cubase, turns out. I have a headset, shocker. So I think this is something I'm gonna have a lot of fun in, and I'm excited. This is a group that is making it accessible. I think you and I both really support anybody out there that's making things like this accessible to just anybody.
Hmm.
And that's really the goal, I think, at the end of the day, is for us, the ideal future of music is one that
Hmm.
makes creativity and expression fully accessible to anybody. So I'm really excited. So I will link this down below in the description for everybody to dig into. And we will go from there. Episode 30, man. We have done 30 of these. And in 30 episodes, we have come the growth in technology in 30 episodes alone is shocking to me. So the next 30 or the next 300, we're going to be podcasting from AR VR. We're just going to be floating
Probably,
around.
honestly,
We're just gonna be floating around. It'll be
we won't
great.
even be talking. We'll just be thinking back and forth.
Yeah, if they could time it right to where, like, I'm looking into buying a home by next summer, where I don't need a home. Like, that would be really helpful. If I could just like live in a cardboard box here soon, my whole life, that'd be great. Just headset on. I'm good. I'd be into it. But John, as always, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for being here. And thanks for the 30 wonderful episodes. Let's keep this rolling. And to keep it rolling, what do you know? You got to like, you got to click subscribe, you got to click the alerts. Dig in and check out Dear Reality's DearVR Spatial Connect. Link is in the description and the show notes. And we will see you next time on the Future of Music podcast.